The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spent a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. Still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, my group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
Aloha everyone, I'm geologist Philip Ong. I'm here with Mr. Dane DuPont. We'll be manning our chats, taking your questions. We'll answer some questions a couple of times in our broadcast today. And we are bringing you guys another Kīlauea volcano update on Friday, January 29th, 2021. It's been 40 days of this eruption, 40 days, and this eruption started at night. We already had the 40th night. So interesting timeline. Starting off, showing you guys here a very sped up time lapse of the thermal camera from the USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory. And we're showing you guys in these bright colors where the lava is the hottest underneath the crust. And so I only have it going back to about January 7th, right before this back part, this eastern part of the island, of the lava lake, crusted over and became more stagnant. I'm doing this because we actually had a post where it actually stagnates all the way right before that, right here. And then kind of the last update we gave you guys, the lava wasn't going around the backside of this island, and we had a little land connection here of crust. And as the pressures come back up, the lava's come back around and has reestablished that route and kind of gone back around the island all the way. So that's the quick version of it. And we can look in a little more detail here. Let's bring up it. See here, it's that one. Yeah, we're gonna play it a little bit slower. So now we're gonna look at just the past 3 days here. You can see we have this perched perched edge on a lava lake, and it's spilling over the edges here on this perched rim. It's like an above ground swimming pool. Here you can kind of see the encroachment of the lava overflow, overturning of the crust back on both sides of this island over here. So you can kind of see that on our north side, right? Remember, north is our north vent's over here. North is this way. This is the west vent camera. We're looking across to the east. So on this north side, we're also having some lava spilling over into that little trench. I'll play it again so we can kind of see that a little bit better here. I'm talking about this perched edge right in here. It's like lava is actually pushing out the bottom and squeezing up underneath the crust and edges as it has been as well, but it's also flowing over the edge of that perched edge there and there and making those small flows. And so the whole thing is uplifting both by raising the rim every time. Remember, every time the lava flows over this perched rim, it adds another layer, and that makes it a little bit taller, and so it can hold a little bit more lava. And then that combined with the whole thing lifting upwards means the whole lava in the lake is still filling very slowly. It's come up a meter. It's maybe 3 feet since yesterday, or a couple days ago, the last report we gave you guys. But still coming up slowly but surely. So that's kind of the closer view of that. We can come back to these if we have questions later on. But let me turn now and show you guys first this the tilt signal on a volcano for the last couple of days here. Last month actually here. So this was the first big inflation we had right over here, where we actually had that stagnation of the surface of the lava lake. And then we had a kind of a reinflation with some small variations in between. We're looking at this blue line of the summit. We're going to ignore the rift zone today until next week once again. And then we had the second inflation event right in here. And this one didn't seem like it slowed down that much, but between this one and then a back-to-back second one that happened right over here, and it's at this point that we start to see the lava not get around the backside of the island. And since then, it's come back up with a possible rain signal, or possibly not, right in there. So that's kind of the pressure variations we're seeing there. So you can kind of see that we had a little bit more pressure, then it went down and back up again. And maybe if I pull up that faster video again and play it, you guys can actually see those two pulses, right? You can kind of see there it's actually going pretty good. And there it pauses, picks back up, pauses, picks back up. Just like that. And one more time. It's going good. It slows down, picks back up, slows down, picks back up. Maybe that's a little more visible now. And pretty clear that corresponds to these pressure variations we're seeing right in here. All right, so just to kind of put things in context, this is going to show you guys just the month view for now, because if we zoom in for the last 2 days, you don't really see a whole lot. Even the last week, you kind of don't see as much of the picture. Right? It's kind of washed out. But to put things in perspective, let's go back to kind of, this is what it looked like over the last 2 months. This is from the Volcano Awareness Month 2021 presentation. And here's our January 2nd intrusion. That was one of our precursors, and then a big eruption deflation that began here. So our little wiggles that were happening are all kind of in this range of 5 to 10 microradians, whereas we dropped by 50 at the start of the eruption. So we're still at a net quite a lot lower than we were before the eruption began. So these are interesting little variations we're looking at. Pressure and a tilt here, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not out of the scale of what we saw before. All right. So just wanted to point out, there is now, if you go to the USGS Twitter, you can find a link. I'm sure it'll be linked to the main website page as well. This S1 camera, here's an active view of it now, but there is now a page that exists that is generating an automatic time lapse every 24 hours there. So it will be connected shortly, I believe, but if you want to get to it right away, it is on Twitter. Find it over there. So you can kind of see this is the last 24 hours right there. And I'm going to switch and show you guys my version for the last 3 days here. And so we'll play the last 3 days and kind of see, this is right after all the rain came through. And so if you're looking at the area over here, we're not having quite a lot of flow around the backside of the island yet. This is that lull and the pressure still. And then it's picking back up. And so we're going to see this junction of lava from both sides coming around the island here. And that's been the case for the last couple of days now. So a little bit longer time lapse gives you a little bit better idea of what's going on there. And there is our current All right, so we'll move on. I'd like to take some questions from you guys today. So we're gonna also cover Maunaloa in more detail. So I'm gonna keep the pace going here. Here's a image released today of snowy Maunaloa. For those who are not aware, we have had a lot of snow on the island, and especially on the top of the two mountains, Mauna Kea and Maunaloa. This is Maunaloa, the long mountain. You can see its long profile right there. Typical shield volcano. It has a more fluid, less viscous, more runny lava that runs a long, long way down the slopes, instead of what you might imagine your St. Helens style volcano, which would fit right inside of there, that same scale. So in any case, in the foreground here, we see the old chain of Creators Road and a piece of the sliver of block that fell in. Let me see if I can zoom it in for you guys. There it is. And that's a piece of the center line with two edges, lots of cracks going through it there. And it's down probably 300-400 feet from the ledge where this photograph is taken. But we'll kind of pan around. There's an even lower ledge in there that's on that west side. That's at around the 900-meter elevation. And a little bit further over, and then a little down, and there is our west vent. So you can see it's got that nice shaped spatter cone around it now. And it still has all the lava pouring out of it, right? A little bit hard to see, but here is the edge of that perched rim of the lava lake, which is open kind of right through there now. And this is kind of the low spot on the outside there. And the other rim comes around the side over here, and you can't really see that low spot, but there is one over there as well. So that's the view here. And maybe I'll zoom in on Maunaloa here for you guys that can appreciate that a little bit more too. There's our Maunaloa shield volcano covered in snow. And if you guys want much, much better pictures of this, go check out Hawaii Tracker, because there are a lot of community photographers contributing fantastic photographs that are just above and beyond. Yeah, so really worth going and checking that out. All right, so let's see about the caption here. If the caption tells us anything else. It's telling us the gas measurement is the same as the last report earlier in the week, and it describes those features I just showed you guys. There's another image released today, and it's titled "This Cracks Divide the Active and Inactive Portions of Halema'uma'u Lava Lake." So I'm going to zoom in on that. We pointed this out to you guys our last broadcast. There's this kind of cracked zone right in here that separates the active lava that's behind the island. This is where it was coming in this direction and stagnating more in here. But this whole thing is now the edge of the lava lake is over here, and then this part is quite a bit lower. They're saying 4 to 5 meters. That's 12, 15 feet lower than this part over here. So I'm going to zoom back out so you can kind of see a little better there. I see this series of cracks over here. All right, there's one over there, and that's the edge right in there. And here's our north vent still poking out, and some of those other smaller islands slash lava rafts slash, we'll figure out what we're going to call them here shortly when we talk about this a little bit more. So noted on here on their caption, they're saying the eastern portion is 4 meters lower, 13 feet, and similar kind of as I just pointed out. All right, so that's the interesting thing there, and as you might, as I'm implying here, they're describing this as they're still calling this island in our descriptions, which is fine with me. That's the long historical tradition, and I think we should. There's a lot of tradition and language, right? More, and it's a little different with science, and so they actually put this in focus by putting out a Volcano Watch this week. Words matter, lava, not fire, which is maybe like a pet peeve. We've been describing fish eruptions as curtains of fire for a long time, but yeah, it's not exactly the most scientifically accurate term. And then when it comes to island or raft or basalt berg, we discussed that before, right? We talked about how, I don't know how many updates ago it was, Dane, but we talked about how ice is a mineral, and you really, it's also a rock, and you kind of want the name of the rock, therefore basalt berg rather than rock berg or lava berg or whatever else. But we did talk about that. It's about a week ago now, huh?
Right. It's interesting, the dynamics on that. And we always, we were playing around last time in 2018 with there was this one particular spot where the lava boats, what USGS would call them at the time, would collect in this one particular wide area. We're like, oh yeah, that's the lava boat marina. Mm-hmm. And it just happened to work perfectly. Like
Yeah,
it
yeah.
described exactly what you're trying to describe, but it was just, when you think about it, it's, pretty funny terminology getting passed around. So that it's interesting to see, the discussion try and, move towards what is move the consensus a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I mean, there's always room for poetry and prose and more colorful descriptions, right? Especially when we're communicating with the public and trying to convey what the thing actually looks like and not lose the audience, right? So that's why we don't always talk about dikes and sills, and we try to kind of talk about blades and fingers, and even though those are not technically accurate geological terms, that's kind of a way that people can imagine it, right? So that's kind of where we land, kind of in that middle gray zone, trying to bridge the gap here between the science and everyday people here. So a lot of detail in here. I won't go through all the detail and a whole lot of. I won't read anything to you guys here, but that's the dilemma here. Dane did mention lava boats. Let me bring this up here. I want to show you guys that this is a USGS video from June 21st, 2018, and I apologize if this brings up any bad memories for anyone, but this is, I think, part of the discussion here, and we're going to heal by talking through it a little bit at a time as it comes up. Yeah, so this is taken from the north side of the lava river. Let me kind of pause it here. This is a time lapse, and this is a lava channel coming through here. It's kind of lighter gray, and you can kind of see the smaller black dots kind of floating their way down and across. That's what we're actually looking at. And so these have been called lava rafts, and they actually call it lava boat as well. And so that's what this video is showing. I'm kind of zooming along there. And obviously this is a river. Everything is getting carried away, but we have a similar kind of situation with rafts of basalt rock in the lava lake at the summit now. And so you do see a relation there. And I did see some of the audience commenting that maybe along those lines, we discussed a possible name for that big island there at, within the summit as, let me see if I can find it again, Mokunui, the big island lanai ka Pele, right? Like Pele's lanai on a big island there. But if we're going to talk about the distinction of island and a thing is floating around and maybe islands have to be rooted, it's been suggested that maybe va'a, the canoe, is a better term, right? And so canoes are kind of boat. So I don't know if you guys can read this description here, but they actually say here, rafts of accreted lava move downstream and look like boats moving down a river. These are termed lava balls or lava boats and form when portions of the fissure 8 cone or levees break away and are rafted downstream. So it's interesting they mentioned the cone being that lighter tephra material, similar to what we have, that
right
current.
The interesting part to me is kind of there's slight difference in what kind of the terminology that we were using at the time in 2018. So we had the lava boats, right, which were coming down the river.
Mm-hmm.
Then we had the lava bergs, which were those floating tephra in the ocean that every once in a while a kayak would almost hit with his boat, right? So it was like, those are the lava bergs, those are the lava boats, and the lava boats don't turn into lava bergs. Like, and it was just this weird, but that was kind of the breakdown that I remember.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there were, as lava was going to the ocean offshore in huge amounts underwater, it would pop up. We would hear like van or school bus sized chunks of floating, glowing rock. And those are what Dane's referring to as those lava bergs. So I'm going to play you guys this here one more time, because there's another video that I meant to have up here that I somehow ended up closed, but I'll pull it up for you guys while you guys watch these lava boats come back through here one more time. And that's because there are some other views of this as well. All right, so let's see what I got here. So yeah, let's put this lava boat away and show you guys a little bit of a closer up, right? So this is some footage that we've shown before, maybe not for our new viewers, but this is one of these rocks that's kind of a little bit buoyant, but not so much. That's kind of emerging out of the rapids of the lava river, and then we'll cut to another view here. Another view here of the a different lava raft going down a stream. Here it is. You kind of see it's cracked and oozing lava and breaking apart as it flows downstream there. And here's where they all collected in 2018, that lava marina, and that's what forced the channel to go around the west side of Pu'ukapoho. That's over here. And that's what took out a Halanui warm pond, which many of us miss over there. And that's the area all covered in lava. It looks, when it was flowing, looked like this. And that is it. That's all I'll show you guys. And it will not traumatize it anymore there. But that's kind of a little bit of what else there is with those islands. So, you know, I kind of like the idea of Va'a, right? You know, I hesitate a little bit with you know, putting the name Pele on there, as I mentioned before. You know, as you guys are just mentioning it, you know, there's more than one volcano spirit. Pele, Ila'au is another one, and I am not qualified to tell you guys which is the one that's at play here. I can only tell you that I'm not going to assume it's the one that everyone knows and not the one that everyone doesn't know, just because that might be culturally wrong. So, but if, you know, the actual pit crater of Halemauma'u is also known as Kīlauea o Pele, the pit of Pele, then maybe something like Va'a o Kīlauea o Pele, right? The canoe that floats around in the pit of Pele. I don't know, something like that. Maybe someone can take that and correct it and take it to the next iteration for me there, and we can see where we end up with those names. But unless you got anything else to add, Dan, about the names, we'll move on from this lava boat, lava island, lava raft, lava canoe, lava berg discussion here, and turn to that filling lava lake. And USGS has actually fixed. They've put in some kind of filtering function, maybe taking the minimum value here, and so now we don't have all those steam returns bouncing off that are kind of skewing our graph, right? We actually have here corrected in the blue line. We can actually see the lava level coming up to that level that we mentioned. Yeah, 205 was it? And look at the text update here, 209, 685 feet. So that's the most recent number, and there it is there. This is what I was trying to point out. One of our previous updates, you know, like the lava level is actually going down at times, right? What's causing that? Is it just contraction, which it could be contraction due to gas loss? And, you know, I still have an open question of whether there might be any slow trickle drain down at the bottom of the pit. If it stops long enough, we can kind of see how long this goes on and maybe calculate some volumes based on that. But that's an interesting little detail to kind of keep an eye on. And SO2, no new SO2, but the most recent value is down here to kind of recap you guys. So we still have that very quick drop off and staying steady as far as we can tell at those elevated but lower levels than the beginning of the eruption. And of course the VOG is still real. Here's the VOG distribution. You know, of course with so much rain it clears out the air, but especially South Kona and the Kona coast is having some of that VOG wrap back around and stick around in the area. So won't dwell too long on that. And we'll move along to the earthquakes here. And the earthquakes look normal, same as usual. Pahala cluster, there's really nothing, not a whole lot. That's, you know, this is the 7 days of data. So if I put it back to the 1 day, so we can kind of get rid of all those yellows. Let's do all magnitudes. Then you can kind of see just in the last day, a couple on the south flank, nothing at the summit of Kīlauea, one at the summit of Maunaloa. We'll look at that next, after our break for questions here after this earthquake update. And you can see a few on the south flank, and really not a whole lot going on in Maunaloa. Kind of one odd deep Mauna Kea one that's kind of normal background activity there as well. So with that, we'll take some of the questions, our first round of questions here. We'll probably do a little bit of a shorter update today. We'll close off after Maunaloa, but I want to make sure we still get to you guys' questions as much as we can here today.
All right, yeah. Thank you, Phil. As every time, we are brought to you by Hawaii Tracker, hawaiitracker.com. Best way to be able to support Hawaii Tracker right now is, you know, share this video. We don't have an advertising budget like many of the other media companies do, so you sharing this video really helps us out. Second way to do that, help out, is go to hawaiitracker.com and become a member. The social media site focused on community-based organization. That sounds like something that tickles your fancy, you know, give us a look out. Third way is monetary help, right? We we take support from our viewers to be able to do this type of content regularly. Best way to support is on hawaiitracker.com/support. So with that, we'll get into some questions. We have some good ones today.
Yeah, and thank you so much, all your supporters. I mean, we really appreciate it. It means a lot to us that you guys are finding value in what we're doing here.
Right. So first one, let's keep it about the summit to begin with. So the cooled lava, like around the side of the island, or raft, or whatever you want to call it. The cooled lava, does it remelt? And if it does, what kind of temperatures does it take to do that? Like, what does it take to cause lava to melt again, to go to soft to hard to soft?
Yeah, so it's all about heat balance, and I think I'm going to turn to an analogy that I've used before. Maybe I haven't used it very recently, so some of you guys will forgive me if you've heard this before. But it's all about like how much heat and how much coolness you have there. So if you have a lot of stuff coming in and there's not a lot there already, you have a lot more lava than you have the rocks floating in them, then those rocks are more likely to melt. If you have more of the cooler rocks and less lava coming in, it's more likely to actually be freezing against and accumulating and kind of attaching, agglomerating to it. And so my analogy is hot chocolate fudge dipped ice cream, right? If you take your ice cream and you have your melted chocolate and you dip your ice cream into the chocolate and pull it out quickly, you'll form a nice hardened chocolate shell around your ice cream. You know, like chocolate's like the liquid lava, the hot thing. In this case, you're just dipping it in, pulling it out. You have more cold in the ice cream than you have hot of the chocolate, and so it actually freezes in that shell. If you leave that ice cream cone, if you dip it in a hot chocolate and just leave it in there, the ice cream is going to melt, right? Kind of depending on the size of your chocolate pot. And by the way, if you haven't done this, obviously you have some experimenting to do, right? But that's kind of the balance, right? And it's fascinating people to hear that things don't instantly just melt in lava, right? They're not to get gruesome about it, but there are examples of people actually stepping in, like, into the lava river and pulling a leg or two out of there, and lava forming a shell around their leg, and they stomp it closed, and then they're burned, but they're still have their still leg, everything is still intact.
I heard, we always hear these weird claims about volcanoes. The one I heard most recently that made me laugh was somebody said, the lava is so dense, even when it's just as dense when it's in liquid state as when it's hardened state. Therefore, you can't step through it. And I was just like, that's hilarious. Sorry.
Well, real quick aside, there's a discussion, someone in the groups to follow, there's a discussion about the Lord of the Rings, right? And like Gollum jumping in after the one ring.
Right.
And would he actually break the crust of that lava pool, or would he just splat? Right? Because what's the density of Gollum compared to the density of that liquid lava? The person's got a point. You may actually not actually step on it, but you wouldn't just like bloop right into it either. You might smack into it first.
Also the velocity of the thing falling, that matters too in the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah. How much crust? How thick's the crust? Yeah, we kind of get
how
really
hot
nerdy
is the
about
lava?
it.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
How gassy, right? Is there a gas bubble? Anyways.
Going from Mordor to Pu'u'o, USGS Sharon asks about, I'm just going to read it verbatim here, Pu'u'o potentially sealed off via USGS. What are the chances of Fissure 8 becoming active again?
I've always maintained that the chances of it becoming active again are very low. And the longer it goes without being active, the more true that is, I believe. It seems like Pu'u'o itself may still be connected to that pathway to the summit. I mean, that's not surprising because it was open for 40 years.
Right.
But east of there, right, east of Pu'u'o, there is certainly something that's blocking any of the signals propagating east from there further. So the longer that stays cooled off, that means that when magma goes back, it's only a matter of time on the rift zone. That's kind of the reality of it. We as humans play the game of, well, maybe it's not in my lifetime, or it just happened. Maybe I'll have another 100 years before it happens again, and that may well be the case. And for those of you guys who are not living in the rainforest here in Hawaii, we kind of joke that, what really will eat your house is not lava more likely. It's actually the growth of the jungle. The jungle will swallow your property way sooner than any lava is more likely to. So that's a reality here. Lava is kind of, more exotic. Of course, when that does happen, it's shocking, of course, because people are yeah, I mean, it's just something that you don't expect to happen as often, right? So
we do have a super chat come through.
All right.
From Freeman. Can you explain the uplift microradiant scale for us, please? So back to the tilt meters and kind of the scale that we're using.
Yeah. So I mean, a radian is related to a degree. A microradian is about what was it? 50 millionths of a degree is what a microradian is. And a way to imagine that.
That's so hard to conceptualize just that, like 50 millionths of a degree. Okay, I got that.
Right. Really small piece of a degree. So like if you know what a degree is, it's a really small piece of a degree. That's one way to think of it. Like if you're thinking mathematical terms, right? Thinking more visual terms. We described this before as if you had like a bar of steel that was like a half-mile long, and you put like a penny under one end of it, and then that inclination of one penny's width across that half-mile, that's about the same as a microradian also. Right, so that's another way to visualize that. So yeah, if we go to our tilt plots, let me bring them back up here and put them back on the screen for you guys. If we go to our tilt plot here, then yeah, we have to look at the scale on the left, and in this particular case, let me zoom in so you guys can see a little better, maybe. And then we have 0 to -5 to -10 to 5. Right, so in this case, we're talking about 5 microradian scale, and that's about my personal unofficial playbook, like the threshold of something being, above the background. If you're kind of above 5 microradians, and you can start looking at it and seeing what's going on there, right? If it's less than 5, then there's all kinds of natural variations. They could be volcanic. They could, could be the gas pistoning. We do see signals smaller than that. But that's, as we saw before, the size of the rain signals can be that big, and the size of these deflation inflation background signals can be that big. So that's kind of the, when we see something like the eruption beginning December 20th and it drops 50 microradians, right? When you scroll over on this side, this particular scale, 0, -10, -20. So all these USGS plots are automatically generated and automatically scaled on their axes, and that's why you got to look every time. Make sure you're not comparing a 10 microradian signal to a 0.1 microradian signal. So that's right. What the what microradians mean to us, essentially.
All right. Well, thank you, Freeman Bashir, for the $5 super chat on YouTube. Next question is also from YouTube, asking about the solidified crust on the lava lake on the eastern section. Is it still lava underneath that crust surface? And just generally the question of solidifying that lava lake. So I don't know if you have that Kīlauea Iki thing queued, or
it's around here somewhere. Yeah, let's look at the time lapse first, because you actually can see that even though we have this, this is the really sped up one, but even though we have this big intact crust on the east side, we still see at this back edge of it like lava leaking out that crack. And that, to me, more than anything, implies that there's lava underneath of there, right? The lava is actually moving and not just sitting there congealed and semi-solid, right? It actually seems like it's flowing underneath there to pop out the other side. And clearly not as much as it is over here, but you do see that. And can I see pop-ups on the edges over here? And you see pop-ups on the edges over here before. Harder to see now with these overflows, but we pointed it out in previous videos. And yeah, so that's kind of why it seems like it's still active. And until lava stops coming in, once it stops coming in, we'll see it actually crust over pretty quickly. We saw that already last week during that, a week and a half ago, during that bigger deflation on the volcano. But if we, let me find that Kīlauea Iki plot, it's around here somewhere.
We're gonna have to just make that a micro for the stream. Like you just press like F7 and poop, Kīlauea Iki picture pops up.
I haven't put it away yet, but I do have a lot of different things lined up here, so I'm gonna find it. There it is. So there's our how Kīlauea was cooling from the top. You can kind of see what they've drawn in different color is more or less how much cool is in each period of time, right? So you can kind of see the thickness at the top is greater than the thickness at the bottom because you can lose more heat at the top more easily. And the sides are similar to the bottom where you kind of have a slower loss of heat and therefore a slower cooling rate, right? In the case of Kīlauea, they drilled in here. The last time was 30 years, 29 years after the eruption, and they still found lava liquid between the crystals down at 240 feet down. And so by that measure, they thought the whole thing crystallized after 36 years. And crystallized at a temperature of 1900 Fahrenheit, 1065 Celsius in that particular case. That's highly dependent on how much water is in your magma, which we discussed before. So that's like a flux and can shift it around. But that's essentially what you're looking at. You're looking at it cooling from the bottom up, the sides in, and the top down. And so the top is really the best indicator. It's what's cooling the fastest. And so when we see the top cooling, it kind of tells us, well, maybe the side must be cooling a little bit also, to some degree, but less than the top. So if we see the top is still thin enough that lava is still going under it and picking it up and pushing it around, then maybe we're having some accumulation on the side, on that back side especially, and but not that much probably, right? And something else that happens is that the lava itself can be abrasive, right? If you imagine, the lava. Imagine if I was in, if I was in some trail and I had grabbed a rock and I just walked along the trail and just dragged a rock along the side of the trail the entire way. I'd basically be eroding that trail with that rock. And even though liquid lava is not the same as solid lava, it still has that mass and it's still abrasive. Especially when you consider
hot liquid sandpaper.
Yeah, especially when you can consider the bubbles of gas in there, right? Actually having bubbles of gas seems like you actually have a variable pressure, right? So you kind of have a little bit more, a little bit less, a little bit more, a little bit less. And that's the sandpaper effect. Sandpaper is made of, like a quartz silica, as is a window pane, which can be perfectly smooth if it's not bumpy and kind of all even. So it's not necessarily just the material, but how it's distributed as well. So there's an erosional effect of lava that's on top of the melting, right? So you can have maybe not as much melting and cooling, but you also have the lava going and trying to physically carve and scoop out areas and erode things as well. So who knows what's really going on in there? I won't, but I can tell you that those are the processes that we would consider being active within that pit.
Right. All right. So I'm going to combine kind of two questions here. We have one from Sandra and one from Clara asking about collapses. So Sandra's asking about what caused the cause of the 2018 crater collapse sequence, and what happened to the old lava lake, and then that turns into Clara's question about the crater. Can the crater collapse anymore, and does this eruption change the potential or probability?
So the 2018 eruption in Lower Puna. The vent opened up at a much lower level than the summit lava lake. And so once that pathway opened up and the 6.9 earthquake allowed the path to widen, then what basically drained the lava lake was gravity. It was gravity draining it out through the rift zone, until the summit collapses, until that upper block, once it got loose and started kind of falling in, it was creating that pistoning, pulsing pressure wave effect. Once it lodged itself for whatever reason, and that's when the eruption actually stopped. And since then, it's refilled back up, so we don't believe there's really any empty space down there at all, right? If there's any empty space, it's just like the little gas bubble sizes or between some rubble of rocks, but for the most part, it's not that much space in there. And whatever space there was has probably been reclaimed by the filling of lava, even if it's just below it, pushing rubble upwards and redistributing it so that there is less space. So that's kind of the first part. That's where it came from. And so, but then we don't think it'll collapse necessarily just because of that, because there's not any empty space underneath it right now. Although when eruptions do end, It's not uncommon to see like gas venting, and then you do see some small scale collapse, right? That, you know, nothing of the size of 2018. 2018 was a caldera collapse event. That's like a once in a lifetime kind of thing, right? We don't expect to see that for a while again, right. You know, although, you know, who knows, you know, in the 1800s, there were collapses, multiple collapses within a single lifetime. But it doesn't, you basically need to drain the lava out somewhere lower down, and we don't have any outlet for that happening now. So we might have some local settling and collapsing locally, but nothing at the scale of 2018. And because there's no pathway to the lower east reef zone, it's not going to go out that way, right? It's going to just kind of adjust locally to the summit.
All right, so we have a bunch of questions coming in today. Some good ones too. There's let's go back as if we're talking about the collapses and things along those lines. The Kīlauea caldera, as we know it now, was there a time in which that area was filled with lava? And if so, when was it? This was a question from Kelly on YouTube.
So, I mean, the Kīlauea caldera it's like a giant rubble pit that gets repaved with surfaces of lava over and over and over again. But underneath that has always been rubble from some previous collapse. So it's almost like a glaze over top of this rubble, and then it kind of just does that. It kind of reglazes itself, and then it collapses and reglazes, collapses, and collapses. So what you see as a current surface of the caldera now, the biggest area of it is a 1919 flow. And that's kind of from that whole era of around then, you know, right before 1920 and all the way to 1924, when there was a lava shield over Hale Ma'uma'u that was like a hill, right? That was actually taller than the south crater wall. So it was getting to the point where if it kept going, it might actually have flowed over and spilled out of the crater to the south. And that was the closest we've come, was in those 1920 years to it actually going out of the caldera. But that's the kind of the biggest area. Also on the caldera floor, probably the oldest area probably goes back to the 1840s. There's 1840s, there's a little bit of 1860. The youngest stuff on there, besides 2018, before that, there's some 74, there's some 71, but it's this whole hodgepodge of all different layers of lava glaze, if you can give it that way, that kind of cover this rubble. And so it's all unstable and it's all cracked. And that's why that's the place where lava comes up more often. It's got all these possible pathways through whatever is underneath there, but it's also got the ring faults, the cracks that make the actual crater that it can come up as well. So.
All right. So we do have a question about the interaction between the groundwater in the area and the eruptions, and how does the like boiling point of water enter into that, or, you know, the dynamics of the water lava interaction?
Yeah, so I mean, it's you can go check out our quick take video we released earlier in the week about the heavy rains on the lava lake, and there's a little bit of talk in there about how once the lava is actually established and there's any groundwater or water flowing towards it, it actually will come. It can't get all the way to the lava to interact with the lava. It comes close. It comes to those hot rocks, and then it reaches it's a evaporation point before it reaches the lava. And so you do have steam vents that form a ring around, but separated from the actual lava. We see that in the webcams even today. So you essentially have a steam, it's called a steam sleeve, that surrounds whatever the pathway of magma comes up through the crater. So to have that most dangerous interaction is at the very beginning of the eruption, when you don't have that pathway established. You got to establish it. And at that point, it all depends on how fast is the lava coming up, how fast is the magma coming up to erupt as lava. And if it's coming up extremely fast, i.e. faster than we've ever seen it in the Western record of this volcano, then it's not going to cause an explosion, right? And so the last big explosion, 1790, and that was right after Captain Cook arrived, and so before the earlier Western scientists came and started writing things down. So the Hawaiian stories do tell us quite a lot about those explosions, but not the details like that.
Right. We have another super chat from Freeman Bashir. Ocean View, and I thank you for that. Ocean View, Hawaii, is the area safe to buy an acre? I know this isn't your forte, but you understand the volcano, that area has been overrun already.
Yeah, so there's only a few places where there is development within a rift zone of the volcano, right? Dane is in one of them, in Leilani, and we saw, in Leilani what happened in 2018.
Yeah,
right? It didn't get everybody, obviously, but it was harrowing for everybody. And Ocean View is an area that is to me scary because it also is on a rift zone. It's in a rift zone of a bigger volcano, Maunaloa. Right, it's in a rift zone of an area that's much steeper than Kīlauea. We were talking about how fast the lava river came out of Fissure 8 and Leilani. Imagine if that thing, had a 10-degree grade, 15-degree grade to go down. That that would be a whole other level of panic.
Just to jump in on that part, where the speed, like 1950, Maunaloa, it was doing. The leading distal tip was thought to be doing 10 to 15 miles an hour. 10 to 15 miles an hour in certain areas. Whereas Fissure 8, the fastest I was able to clock it at was around, over periods of time, was over about a half a mile an hour. Less than 1 mile an hour. It was not moving that fast. And over multiple hours, right? There would be periods where it found some little hill, right, and it gets a little momentum and it comes down kind of quick, but overall it was on the slow side. Whereas 1950 Maunaloa went from the rift to the ocean in 4 hours. Was that it?
3 hours for the first
3.5 hours. Yeah, insane.
Yeah. So it's all about what you're planning on doing there, right? To keep like we've discussed in the Lower East Rift Zone, it's a similar situation. There's pros and there's cons. The con is you're in essentially the highest lava risk zone you can live in, right? Where depending on where you live in Ocean View, especially if you're up in that kind of northeast part of it, like literally your house could split in half with a fissure, as we saw happen in Leilani, unfortunately for some people, right? If you're farther over in a southwest part and you're downhill from there, so it's kind of like a roulette wheel. It'll come out and it'll run downhill fast, and it's gonna cut through everything, but it may not get everybody. So it certainly would be an impact. It's not somewhere I'd invest a whole lot of money, but if you want to have, more rustic accommodations or, then more power to you. Some people are looking for that connection to nature, to that connection to the earth, and they want to feel the earthquakes and they want to smell that fog blowing through there all the time. I don't know. I mean, it's to each their own, right?
I will say this. If I was to buy a lava lot in Ocean View, I would make sure to do it on top of the 1907 flow. That is the high ground. Yeah. So that we'll leave it at that.
Just like in the
a lot of it is not the high ground.
Yeah, the old flows are the highest ground.
Yeah, old flows are the highest ground. All right. Well, thank you for the super chat. So this kind of comes into the next question. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe we can switch to Maunaloa here, and we can do another round of questions here. In a bit, or do we have?
Well, this one plays in all right. So we'll do this, and we'll get into the Maunaloa. So how come why doesn't try and divert the lava? We didn't try and divert it really in 2014, 2018. That's a question from YouTube.
So official agencies will not divert lava, right? The reason they won't do that is for liability, because if you change the course of nature, then you're liable for what nature does afterwards, right? So if you divert the lava flow from, and save one person's house, the person whose house it does take out afterwards could sue you, right? Especially if you're the government. Now, we have seen individuals have no disincentive to not do that for their own house. You can, just build a wall around my house. It's my house, and it goes to your neighbor's house. Then you can fight between you and your neighbor, and we'll see how that actually goes. But the government agency will never take that liability, and that's basically it.
Yep. And that, Iceland, they've diverted before. Other places have diverted before successfully. Italy has diverted before. It is possible. It's just, here it's different, and the lawsuits have been one major thing. But we did one private guy in 2014 did build a lava wall, and the lava hit it and stopped. And I even had somebody that was affiliated with organizations tell me, "Oh, no, the lava wall didn't do anything. It just stopped right there at it."
Yeah, the flow was petering out.
Yeah,
right? But if you hadn't put that wall, it would have petered out in the middle of his living room. So
right,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that the Maunaloa weather station on the north side of Maunaloa, so the weather observatory that measures the ozone in the atmosphere, it has a giant lava diversion barrier above it as well. It's already in place. They're actually way up at 11,000 feet, so not a whole lot of time to evacuate, and that might buy them just enough time to get rescued by aircraft or something. So there's also some issue of whether it's built ahead of time. There's just some structure, like if there's a road there and it just goes down a road, well, it's not like you put the road there for the lava, it just went down the road. But if you did it while the eruption is actually going, and then you built a road for the lava and then went down the road, then that might be something different. So I don't know.
Right.
That's I think untested legal ground, but I don't think any agency is gonna.
And I've talked about something. Oh yeah, the agencies are definitely not. But I've talked to like homeowners associations where I was like, like hypothetically, Ocean View. What if you were to build a moat around it that channels lava around the subdivision instead of letting it get into the streets and developing channels that run through the subdivision? Right, do that before it erupts, so when it comes down, it's already there. It's going to come down, but that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money.
I'm not sure what to say about that. I'm not sure, the national park next to Ocean View, or there's other areas that it's something for them to consider and explore, right? But no official opinion on that. But yeah, Ocean View and Mauna Loa. Mauna Loa is something that we want to keep an eye on as well. And we've been talking about Mauna Loa for a while, and so today we're gonna use the Volcano Awareness Month program that just was released yesterday, entitled "When Mauna Loa Erupt Next." I'm not gonna present the whole thing to you guys. We'll give you guys some little clip and some excerpts of it later in future videos, but we're going to lean on this a little bit here. And so I'll start off with just a short clip by Frank Truesdell, geologist who's been studying Mauna Loa for over 2 decades, and let him talk us through here for not quite a couple minutes.
If we look at earthquake counts now over the last 2 years, we see that we have bins of earthquakes, and these are binned by the week. So you can see the blue lines represent earthquakes per week, and there were periods of time where we went relatively high, and then we've gone back down to below 100 per week, and then we go up to 100 per week, and sometimes exceed, kind of come back down. And so we're kind of going up and down, but these are in earthquakes per week, not earthquakes per day. So this is the kind of plot that we would expect to see, and if it was earthquakes per day, then we're kind of in the same range as prior to 1984. Here is the plot by earthquakes per day, and you can see that sometimes we get up to in the hundreds, but mostly you can see the earthquakes. If you were to kind of do a best fit line, we're still relatively below 50 earthquakes per day. And the most recent period, we're actually down in seismicity. So far, even though the activity looks fairly active at the summit, the earthquake counts aren't quite up to the same types of numbers that we saw prior to 1975, 1984.
All right. Were you able to hear that, Dane?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So yeah, I guess his pointer doesn't show up very well, but that was essentially it. So that's just one short little excerpt of that talk, and that's really the crux of it. The crux of the update of what's happening in Mauna Loa is there's not enough earthquakes. The earthquake rates aren't high enough. So kind of hundreds per day is what you need, going up to possibly thousands per day leading up to an eruption. So here's our past month monitoring data from Maunaloa, and we have had earthquakes. One thing he mentions is that this map is showing all size earthquakes, and they're only comparing, if they're going to compare to the previous eras, those numbers, those reference guides, are only 1.6 and higher. So all these little ones don't count towards those values. But even still, even with this kind of way that they're binning it on automatic page here, here's our earthquake rates and depth for the past month. This is earthquakes per day. And our scale is 0, 5, 10, 15, 20. This is 20 earthquakes per day. We're nowhere near where we need to be. And of course, we talked about how the past month is actually a lot lower because of the activity. So maybe we go, nope, that's not it. Maybe we go to the past year. Do I have that here somewhere? Maybe not, but if we, the past year is what we just saw in his plot, in fact. So in any case, we're nowhere near there right now, especially as Kīlauea is erupting. So yeah, this is what we'll show next. This is an INSAR image. This is a satellite-derived difference in elevation based on radar. And so what you see here is kind of, these are notoriously hard to understand, but I'll just give you the solution here. When you see like a butterfly pattern like this, one lobe and another lobe, that means that there's a dike, a long body, injecting somewhere in the middle of there like that. And then these larger rings are showing that the whole mountain is swelling. And there's actually a scale here. You know, every cycle of color is 1.5 centimeters, more or less, right? So kind of between there and there, 1.5 centimeters. And depending on how broad of an area you're looking at, you could say that there's been, you know, quite a bit of uplift. The whole mountain swelling, not just the summit, but you can see that all the flanks, southeast, northeast. It's interesting little northeast little finger over here in the northeast rift zone. Not quite as visible pattern here in the south, right? And so this is an interesting pattern, this kind of north part of it. So INSAR is a little bit tricky, and we'll turn to what they presented as GPS values here. So this is GPS for the last 3 years, and the way this works is at the base of the arrow is where the station is, and the length of the arrow is the magnitude of the signal there. So I'll zoom it in some more. So this is Mokua Ve'oveo, Maunaloa Summit Caldera. And you can kind of see that the stations on the southeast side are moving much bigger arrows than the ones on the other side. This is over the past 3 years, and this is not unexpected because we know that over in this direction is Kīlauea, and Kīlauea has just collapsed 2 years ago. And so there's more space, and that was kind of a lot of that pattern kind of going that way. But otherwise, you can kind of see there's kind of somewhere, there's a center over here somewhere. Everything radiates outwards from there, right? So you can kind of imagine that the center of that intruding, filling magma body is in here, right? So we know it's that kind of shape, and it's right in the middle over here somewhere. If we kind of refine, they present us with here's a 1 year plot. So let's zoom into the 1 year, and kind of a similar pattern, right? You can kind of see not as much motion up here in the northeast, but similar radiation from a point somewhere in there. We'll keep going kind of quickly. If you guys want more detail, we'll actually go look at the talk in full, but I'm gonna give you guys just a short recap here. You get to 6 months, and now you start to see something funky happening in the north side of the crater here. Now this one we saw before, but this one over here is suddenly moving back, not very fast, but it's pointing back to the southeast, almost implying that whatever was in here shifted over, and maybe it's over here on this side of the crater, possibly. Otherwise, you still have that radiation pattern kind of going out, and may not be just one body, but maybe this body that was here extend over this way further, and that's kind of complicating the signal. And that's even more true if you go into the last 3 months. In the last 3 months, no motion over there, right? And we'll look at this 3 month period. 3 months ago was October, is that right? More or less. So October.
Yeah, that October.
So we'll talk about the October signal in relation to what this is showing us as well here shortly. But this is part of our enigma that's maybe getting unraveled a little bit, is seeing this station. Which, if we go forward to the last month, you can see that in the last month it's actually resumed moving away from the summit over there. So it's going to resume its path back over this way. But you see there was a little interval where it actually stopped and did a shimmy back in the other direction. And otherwise, you can kind of see that the southeast component is still bigger in the northwest, but it's, this is just the last month. If you go to the last 3 months, you can kind of see that there's some bigger components going northwest. It's starting to balance out a little bit, and that may be because Kīlauea is refilled. You're starting to see that at some point it's going to catch up and rebalance itself. So let me jump to the this page was looked at before, tilt and deformation data. And on a tilt signal, there's not a lot to look at there for the past week. This was we imagined that snowfall, little variation, our scale is 0.5 to minus 0.5. This is just a little blip, hardly anything compared to what we see on Kīlauea. There it is. So we'll go down to the GPS, which is more interesting. And this is a distance across the caldera from north to south on Maunaloa. You can kind of see it's been spreading apart. It goes a little closer together, it spreads apart, it's a little closer together, it spreads apart, a little closer together, it spreads apart, it's a little closer together. And this is a big deviation in October 2020 that we saw following a Kīlauea events by Namakani Paio, northwest of Kīlauea. That's when we see this kind of shift happening. So it's almost like Maunaloa adjusts, that dike is able to extend farther to the north in some way. So the distance between here, the volcano is still swelling that entire time, but the distance between these 2 points happens to reverse for that little period right in there, right, that we saw between 6 months ago and 3 months ago, or 3 months ago period. And then from 1 month ago now, it's back in a rise, resuming its regular trend. Right, and looking at a 5-year trend, that's this little blip right over here. And that's interesting to kind of, speculation at this point, but we see this up and down pattern, right? Maybe that's how it works. It refills the main chamber, then it kind of goes down a hallway a little more, down pressurizes to go into that one of those cracks in the rift zone, that connects to the rift zones, whether it's northeast or southwest. In this case, it looks like it's going north a little bit. So that's the first clue we have to what this might actually be. It's kind of just an adjustment of the center of inflation, more so than, well, it wasn't actually inflating because it still was. It's just from a different point, so that this distance was actually getting squeezed closer together. So one of the little tricky nuances that can occur on the volcano there. And so it kind of just how it's closed off. Eruption is not imminent, but stay aware, stay informed. If you guys live in Ocean View, it's probably worth watching Frank Truesdale's full Maunaloa video. And you can find that on the USGS Hawaiian Volcano Observatory Volcano Awareness Month outlets there. So back in 2002, there's a slight swelling. Everyone says it's imminent.
There.
Yeah.
The Ocean View, because we know when we were there for the volcano awareness from Civil Defense, and they were talking with Ocean View residents, that there isn't much of a plan in place for evacuations and timelines and things along those lines. The county would like to, have somebody help them develop it, and I think the community, association, the community, also wants to have a plan. But as of right now, there isn't much of a plan for that. So it's, still needed. That's something that hopefully can get further refined, using things like Truesdale's inundation zones and things along those lines before it happens, right?
Yeah. So he does discuss that those are repaired. He doesn't go into the detail of them, but he does bring them up in that talk, and that's something we'll dive into in some future communication with you guys when it's a little bit more relevant, right? Right now it's more academic, right? So I do have a few questions that I pulled out from USGS feeds that I want to kind of just make sure I mention here, and then we'll turn to our viewer questions to kind of finish it off here. But some interesting information comes out once in a while. So here's a reply to a question, and they note that when both the north and west vents were active until the 26th of December, lava fed the lake from 2 locations, and the effusion rate was 6 cubic meters per second. That's a number we haven't seen a whole lot of other places yet. And when we calculated it originally based on their estimates, we were getting much, much bigger numbers than that, right? And that was kind of based on that initial sulfur rate and all of that. So it might have been higher, but for that 6-day average, perhaps 6 cubic meters per second. That's telling. Since then, it's been a steady 4 cubic meters per second from the west vent, right? That hasn't been enough to maintain circulation through the whole lake. But that number is similar to that long-term pool rate, right? So that's kind of why that's interesting. That's a sustainable rate long-term. So if it stays at that rate, that's interesting. Right? So a couple little notes there. The question came in: while the depth is continuing to slowly rise, is the stagnant side of the lake continuing to rise at the same rate, and the islands too? We've discussed this in the past. I just want to make sure that we document USGS's response here. Too big. So, good question. Something they've been tracking with the rangefinder. They found that the eastern side continues to rise a little, but not at the same rate as the western side. The difference of several meters now. So just kind of make sure we document their input there. And any estimation on when a western vent will be submerged if current effusion rates continue. So more good info. The vent initially opened at 730 meters above sea level. And so the lava lake surface is within 7 meters of that elevation. However, there's now a 40-meter high spatter cone protecting the vent. So the question really is that spatter cone enough protection if we come up another 7 meters? That's going to be an interesting point in time, which might happen in about a week and a half or so, if we can kind of keep up the same rate. If not, maybe 2 weeks. It keeps going like that. We're going to see if that cone protects it, or if we have some interaction where it maybe starts wanting to go back in there. Kind of depends how in my mind, it depends how coherent that cone actually is, right? If it's all cracked and stuff, and like you actually can't allow lava to get out of there, if it's not like a pipe that can work, that can kind of remain intact through the filling lava lake, then maybe it does do something funny. So we'll see. We're going to kind of getting there. Then one last, more fun thing here. Someone said that they should put out an intern next to the picture of the fissure, the West Vent fissure, for scale. And they wanted to play a little bit here, so they say, can we assume that a sitting Bernie is about 5 feet high, if still the distance between the highest point in a cone and a lava lake is 27, more or less, sitting Bernies? So that gives you a scale, and Mike Curtis has followed through and appropriately put a Bernie for a scale next to our West Vent fissure right there. So if you guys are kind of wondering at the scale of things here, we've never quite given you guys a good scale there.
Yeah, I still owe the stream a Photoshop of Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon down there.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's our little fun for the week here, end of the week here. So, all right, Dane, what you got for any other questions before we wrap it up here?
Right, so we do have some more questions coming through. Let's try to pull some from Maunaloa Focus. So does this eruption that's currently going on with Kīlauea have any threat of inducing activity on Maunaloa?
It's certainly changing the pattern of Maunaloa a little bit, but Maunaloa has got its own engine, so to speak, right? It's got its own pathway of magma that comes up, and so Kīlauea can affect the pressure of how much it's holding in, holding out, but it's still coming in no matter what, right? So depending on how an eruption were to happen, it maybe could induce an eruption. It's more likely in the past that Mauna Loa events have induced Kīlauea events, but not so much the other way around, right? Because Kīlauea is on the side of Mauna Loa. So if Mauna Loa's side moves, it moves Kīlauea. If Kilauea's side moves, it doesn't move Mauna Loa. Like, that's kind of the relationship there. So we have, like in 1868, a southwest rift eruption in Ocean View area, right? Opened up. It also caused the whole south flank to move of Kīlauea in response, and then eruptions along the whole east rift zone of Kīlauea as well, and the summit. Not long-lived, small, but everywhere. So that's the opposite effect, Mauna Loa inducing Kīlauea. Kīlauea to Mauna Loa, I don't know if that's quite as likely to happen there.
All right, so is there any chance of tsunami associated with the current ongoing eruption?
Not really, because we're up above sea level, and really to have tsunami, you have to generate some significant amount of water in a short time. And so even things like landslides don't generate tsunamis very often. Depends on the size of the landslide and the shape and where it goes. But normally you need to have a fault line that's quite long. So like these plate junctions where you can have, like in Chile, the biggest earthquakes we've had, biggest tsunamis, you might have 1,000 miles where the fault line breaks up and rises 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 feet, something like that. And if that case, you have 1 or 5 feet across 1,000 miles, that volume of water is just immense, and that's the tsunami kind of generating force we worry about, rather than like dropping a coin in an ocean, right? So there's nothing happening around sea level. It's true that the flanks of the volcano can move, but they're doing that all the time, and there's no evidence of anything catastrophic happening. On Kīlauea, pretty much, as far as we can tell, Maunaloa is a little different, but no threat of tsunami. Earthquakes are different, right? Earthquakes can happen all the time, and they're the ones that generate tsunami, and that can happen totally independent of the volcano. So that's what to watch, is other earthquakes. Not just in Hawaii, but around the whole Pacific Rim.
Probably, focus with a good amount of focus on Chile and Alaska as being, and maybe even Russia being some potential.
Japan.
Yeah, some spots to watch. So, went a little bit off topic, but from YouTube, when was the last time that Maui saw lava? Do you remember offhand?
1790, I believe.
So that's 1790, yeah.
Yeah, I want to say it was like La Perouse Bay in the southeast side, off of Haleakala. If you go there, let's see if I can find it here on Google Earth, on this, not quite Google Earth, but zoom in over here on Maui. Where are we? Right down in here. You can see that rift zone of Haleakala in this kind of area, and I believe it might be one of these lava flows in here. It's one of those newest ones, something like that. I don't remember if it's that one or this one offhand, but you can kind of see there's some very recent volcanics here, another vent right in here, and one up in here too, right? All coming off this rift zone.
Right.
So back out here. So Maunaloa erupts on average every 7 years over the last 2,000 years, and so it's really been a long time. It's quote unquote overdue. Of course, volcanoes don't keep daily planners, monthly, yearly planners, so she'll go when she's ready. It's gonna happen, it's gonna happen at some point, but it's probably not gonna happen until Kīlauea gets past what it's doing now, because Maunaloa in response seems to have really quieted down as far as its shaking activity. Maybe that's just because of the more passive filling. It's still filling, but it's not having to force its way in quite as much anymore, as Kīlauea is exhaling with its eruption.
So with I think that kind of does it with most of these questions that I have here. There's one more question about the dynamics between a ongoing eruption and a hurricane, and what kind of dynamics would you have there? And it's one of those things that we have seen before.
Yeah, we've discussed it a little bit, because especially in 2018, there was a massive weather system that was induced by all the gas and heat put off by not just the fissure, but that 8.5 mile long open river of lava as well, right? And so we did see kind of effects on the weather, and because it was a much larger area and it was near residential areas, we worried more about flying shrapnel, right? Like tephra, glassy lava flying around, gases that were really, really intense, getting blown to places where people weren't used to it, and being very locally concentrated, but then also very transient and blowing out of the way pretty quickly. So you can certainly see that kind of thing. You see, the gas is blowing different directions, because our current eruptions is down deep in a hole, right? It's so far down no one can even see it unless you have special privilege. I don't expect much effect there at all, right? The actual footprint is, it's very localized as well, right? So I don't think
one thing I remembered really about it was the how it would completely white out conditions all over the flow field, like total whiteout, beyond whiteout, no chance of even seeing anything 5 feet in front of you conditions, and how when it happened, it was really not that much of a change on the localized system in Leilani or on the volcano directly in the fissure, but it was more. It was the change elsewhere. There was maybe more pronounced, but in Leilani, it was still just rain and all that kind of stuff. The biggest thing was you could no longer see what the volcano was doing, right? You lost all forms of monitoring during that time. So it was like a period where we went in for like a few days, and it was right at as the fissure was dying out too, so people wanted to see it, but just nothing for a few days.
Yeah, so yeah, we have seen quite a lot of steam already just with the heavy rain, you know, on the cameras. In 2018, we didn't really have a stationary thermal camera because the eruption was too big, so we had to fly a helicopter and shoot thermal imagery. And so that's what we do have now, is we have a thermal camera that can see through the steam, and that's basically why we can keep watching. That's a little bit different. So
and it was like the rain that Hurricane Lane was dropping, you know, records around the rainfall on the around the island, especially on the east side during that period. But it didn't even hold a candle to the rain that Fissure 8 was putting out in Leilani Estates on a daily for months. Like, it was legitimately at least like a foot of rain a day at times. And it was creating its own localized system. So it was just this constant thing. And it lasted after the eruption. The eruption ended for several months, the localized, you know, effect of weather.
Yeah. I mean, it was really dramatic during eruption. You know, you'd be driving to Pahoa and you'd be in the sun and you'd cross a wall like driving into a car wash, and it'd be dumping inches per hour. Yeah. And, you know, remember at the hub, we look at the, you know, the awnings and our tarps and things are full of just Pele's hairs and Pele, you know, floating everywhere, washing out with that huge amount of, kind of clean things out, right? But, you know, that was a challenge because people were camping, and people who didn't have places to stay, or they're on the ground, or having to move stuff through the mud, or it was kind of
insane.
Not the best time, yeah.
Right. Well, that does it for me. We do have some donators and supporters that have come through that we want to acknowledge.
Donators or donors, one way or the
other. Michael D, Brian B, Jana K, Daphne F, Rolene B, and Lynn S. So thank everybody for, you know, helping us to, you know, continue to make this kind of content. Your donations go a long ways. And I think that
was Royland. Yeah.
Oh, Royland. I'll pass it back to you.
Well, thank you guys for joining us. Hope you guys have a good weekend. We'll come back to you guys on Monday with another live broadcast. We do have quite a lot of content that we'll be dropping on hawaiitracker.com. So check that out. Little clips of USGS videos. We'll kind of we'll take what they have and rework it a little bit and make it so you guys can enjoy it as well. So we'll have that coming out over the weekend and plenty over the next week as well. And until then, you guys, thank you for your viewership. For Dan DuPont and Philip Ong, aloha.